Here's what happened across the U.S. in the past hour, all in 60 seconds. Police arrested protesters outside a federal building in Minneapolis after a tense anti-immigration demonstration. Authorities said objects were thrown at officers and multiple charges are under review. President Volodymyr Zelensky said U.S. officials gave Ukraine and Russia a June target to reach a peace framework. He said talks are expected to continue as attacks on infrastructure persist. A CNBC report says new Epstein file disclosures are intensifying pressure on Washington as lawmakers demand fuller transparency. The controversy is widening divisions over what remains redacted and who should review unsealed records. Georgia officials challenged the FBI's seizure of 2020 Fulton County ballots, calling it an overreach that disrupts state election authority. Federal officials said the records are tied to an ongoing criminal inquiry. Iran said it will not give up uranium enrichment and signaled Washington is not treating talks seriously. The statement hardened Tehran's position as nuclear diplomacy continues under rising military pressure. Repure's Mike Lawler said a Trump-posted image mocking Barack and Michelle Obama was racist and unacceptable. His criticism added to Republican backlash over the post's fallout. Congressional talks on DHS funding narrowed around ICE reforms, including body camera and accountability proposals, as a deadline neared. Negotiators said failure to compromise could trigger a partial Homeland Security lapse. President Trump moved to exclude key Democratic governors from a traditionally bipartisan White House gathering during the Governors' Summit. Democratic officials called the move a break with precedent and a blow to federal-state cooperation. Here's what happened across the U.S. in the past hour, all in 60 seconds. Investors are bracing for a double whammy from upcoming U.S. jobs and inflation data that could reshape Fed rate expectations. Strong payrolls or sticky prices could keep borrowing costs higher for longer. Democrat Chastity Verrett Martinez won a Louisiana special election in a district Trump carried by double digits in 2024. Her victory gives Democrats a fresh organizing boost ahead of the midterms. Senator Adam Schiff said Trump is trying to subvert the 2026 midterms through pressure on election systems and federal power. He said Democrats are preparing legal and legislative responses to block those efforts. Debate is growing in bond markets after Kevin Warsh floated, reviving a formal Fed Treasury accord on policy boundaries. Investors say any shift in that relationship could affect rate expectations and Treasury yields. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries said Democrats will block Trump's push to nationalize the 2026 midterms. He argued election administration belongs to states and warned federal takeover efforts would face court challenges. San Francisco Mayor Daniel Lurie urged both sides to reach a deal as a teacher strike threatened school operations across the city. District officials said prolonged walkouts could disrupt classes for thousands of students. The Trump administration's cuts to federal science programs are squeezing small firms that rely on research grants and contracts. Business owners say canceled awards and delayed payments are forcing layoffs and project shutdowns. Green Day is set to perform in a high-profile Super Bowl segment, adding major music star power to this year's event. Producers say the appearance is part of a broader strategy to boost halftime and broadcast engagement. Here's what happened across the U.S. in the past hour, all in 60 seconds. An Associated Press review says investigators found no evidence of a formal Jeffrey Epstein client list that could support broad new prosecutions. Records show authorities tied criminal charges primarily to Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. President Volodymyr Zelensky said U.S. officials set a June target for Ukraine and Russia to reach a peace framework. He said diplomacy will continue as fighting and infrastructure attacks persist. Repuer Mike Lawler called a Trump-posted image mocking Barack and Michelle Obama racist and said it should not have been shared. His comments added to Republican criticism after the post was deleted. Iran said it will not give up uranium enrichment and suggested the U.S. is not negotiating seriously. The statement hardens Tehran's position as high-stakes nuclear diplomacy continues. Congressional negotiators are racing to reach a DHS funding deal as Democrats demand stricter ICE rules, including body cameras and clearer use of force standards. Without agreement, Homeland Security faces a funding lapse at the deadline. Investigators searched the Tucson home of Annie Guthrie and her husband as the disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie entered a new phase. Authorities removed potential evidence and said no suspect has been publicly identified. Kevin Warsh's proposal for a clearer Fed Treasury policy accord sparked debate across bond markets this week. Investors said any shift in that relationship could quickly affect yields and rate expectations. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said Trump's claim about a Penn Station renaming for funding arrangement was an absolute lie. He said no such deal was offered in transit funding talks. President Trump moved to exclude key Democratic governors from a traditionally bipartisan White House gathering during the Governors' Summit. Democratic officials called the move a break from precedent and a setback for federal-state cooperation. Minnesota immigrant rights groups said federal enforcement operations have intensified despite protests and lawsuits. Organizers report wider fear in affected communities as officials defend the crackdown.